Most breaches are caused by exploiting oversights in basic cybersecurity fundamentals, but complex hybrid multi-cloud infrastructures make cybersecurity hygiene challenging. Red Seal can help. It shows you what's on your network, how it's connected, and the associated risk across public cloud, private cloud, and physical environments. With Red Seal, you'll get control of your cybersecurity fundamentals so you can protect your organization from the inevitable attack vectors and reduce your cyber risk. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/Red Seal.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. We are looking for high-quality guest suggestions for our Enterprise Security Weekly podcast to fill our upcoming recording schedule. We're committed to educating and providing entertainment for the InfoSec community and would love to hear from you about who you would like us to interview on that show. Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and submit the form. You can actually do that for all the shows, but we're looking for some ESW guests. Also, join us at InfoSec World 2020, June 22nd to 24th, now at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort. Security Weekly listeners save 15% off the InfoSec World Main Conference or World Pass. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW2020. Click the register button to register with our discount code, or hit the schedule button to sponsor a micro interview. All right, gentlemen, I got Jason 2 weeks in a row for articles. You know, it gets interesting. I try to avoid so much of the COVID-19 stuff, but there are some good articles that talk about different lessons learned and some other stuff. So I always like to pull these in to help at least try to educate people, you know, the next time. In this first article, I'm reading it. It's called "Executives and Boards Avoid These Missteps in a Crisis." And I stopped for a second. I said, wait a minute. I think some state and federal governments might benefit from this article too.
Absolutely, 100%. Let's not make a mistake here. The situation that we're in is changing the way we do work forever. I mean, it's simply going to change the outlook on the way organizations look at how we do work and kind of the future of how we handle crises like this.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You know, there's kind of three traps that boards and executives and I think government agencies can fall into. Mm-hmm. And this article talks about those three traps and potentially a set of questions to ask to avoid those traps. And, you know, this first one is really interesting to me, that narrow thinking, right? Is we kind of have sometimes tunnel vision thinking about a very specific narrow piece of the crisis. And, you know, did everybody get, you know, all the information from all the people before they made decisions, or did we just kind of go with this narrow assumption?
I think this applies to so many things beyond even just what we'd label as a crisis, right? I think these are mistakes that many organizations make when faced with a major outage or a major decision about what product they're going to go for. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a crisis. I've seen these three things in a lot of different, major decisions, regardless of
it's one of those things, Paul, where when stress ensues, you start going into these comfortable places, right? Yep. So, I mean, for narrow thinking, I look at it this way. Just look outside of the company, right? Look outside of the company to advisors. Look at what competition's doing. Go out to, we talked about it in the previous episode or segment of the episode, just going out to your community and really getting a diverse thought process, right? About how other organizations are responding.
Yeah. And I think this whole concept, you know, obviously there's a lot of deferring to the leader. You know, did you get information from the other? I think it's this concept of conformity, the third one, that is my big issue here is, you know, how much dissent was there? How are you trying to squash that dissent? Are you really taking it seriously as a way to just kind of push through certain policies and stuff? That was probably the one that was most interesting to me because I've seen a lot of that out there to expedite a decision.
Sure. And I would say a lot of that dependent on the culture of the leadership team. Because it's only going to be successful if the leadership team embraces it, right? If the top leaders, the CEO, the board built a culture that, you know, the only way to get anything done is by deferring to me and I make all the decisions. That's a culture problem, right? But from my perspective, this is where diversity and thought leadership should be allowed to thrive, especially in these situations. But it has to be supported in the culture. If you don't want groupthink to set in, if you don't want that, ultimate dictator power to set in, it's got to be supported from the top down. It's got to be part of the culture.
Yeah, agreed. I brought this second article in because I want to use it to set up the third article, which to me was a little more interesting. There was a study, 2/3 of remote workers given no cybersecurity training from employers in the past year. We know the challenges with security awareness training, the effectiveness of that. The other interesting thing that was in this article is 61% of respondents are using personal devices when working remotely, which makes this a little more challenging. But I use this as a setup article for number 3, but I'll let you guys comment if you want to.
It's so dangerous. I mean, even in my own home, my oldest managed to get nasty malware on Windows device in not a lot of time, right? And so if you're not a cybersecurity professional working from home, that may go unnoticed, right? And that could be really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was surprised that it was actually that high of folks not getting training, and it really depends on what you consider training, right? I mean, my organization has gotten away from that traditional sit in front of an LMS system and put the checks in the boxes to more of campaign-driven awareness and education and relating it to real life and really taking that human aspect to it. And that's our version of training, right? But I think it's more effective that way. So I don't know what those numbers consisted of. Was it, sit in front of the screen and check some boxes every year? Hopefully not.
Yeah, let's hope not. Yeah, and like I said, I use this as a setup article for the next one, which is how 5 companies handled the shift to remote work and what changes could stick around. We talked about, you already said this, Jason. Look, the way we work going forward has changed forever. And so I think we all realize that. 2 of the companies in here I thought had really interesting approaches that I thought were good learnings for others, not necessarily for this crisis, but potentially the next one. The first one was Tibco. Tibco had put together a 3-part plan for the transition, tried to preserve aspects of their culture, and they went out and identified a core group of employees to work from home. Then they kind of got those things set. Then they started to shut down offices and then went back and after everybody was there and looked to fill gaps in kind of their approach and plan, right? So they had a very kind of controlled 3-step process of how to move to remote, which I thought was really interesting. It wasn't just like, boom, they kind of planned it out.
Yeah. No, I mean, they were very successful with that, right? I think the rollout is really going to depend on, your existing posture as an organization. Our organization was very familiar with remote workforce. A lot of our organization was already working remote. It was just getting that last, maybe third out there working remote. But we took a similar approach, right? It probably wasn't as many employees that we had to worry about. But we had a core set of folks who went remote well in advance, allowed us to have confidence that going 100% remote was going to be successful. And then we eased it in. And then we didn't physically start shutting down buildings until the states declared emergencies and that we had to. So we left our offices open until it was declared by each state, right? And to be honest with you, the sector that we're in, because of the clients that we support, we are considered critical infrastructure, but we still wanted to shut down those office spaces because we can work remote, and we were thinking about the safety of our employees top, right? That was our number one concern.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The one thing it's going to change is how we scope and threat model crisis, and I think that just like any good business continuity plan, it needs to be tested, right? Yeah. So if it means that everyone's working, remotely, then that has to be tested, right? 100%. And if it means everyone's going to access our applications and our data in a certain way, that's not something every organization can just throw a switch, right? It's something that needs to be tested. And I think it will make people hopefully think differently about security and protecting, like Matt says, apps, users, and data. And how do you do that at scale as close to 100% of those scenarios as you can get, and then make sure you test it.
Yeah. That's why I like the laser fish scenario here, because they created kind of a 4-step plan, but it was like day after day, right? So Tuesday, they evaluated who the essential people were in the critical processes. Then on Wednesday, they did training, made sure everybody could log in. Then Thursday, they locked down the building, everybody went home. And then on Friday, they reevaluated what was working, what wasn't, and then did more training to address those things they couldn't account for before they went home. But it was a very scripted, planned out approach, similar to what you kind of talked about, Jason, with what you guys did in creating an environment to be as successful as possible during that transition.
Yeah. And I mean, planning and communication are the key pieces to this, right? I mean, as long as you're doing it in a structured, procedural way, so that way you can anticipate any risks that may happen. And then from there, you're constantly communicating out to the user base, letting them know exactly what's happening. Even if there are issues that arise, as long as you're communicating those out to the user base, they're going to be aware. They're going to have situational awareness on what's happening.
Yeah. The next article, CIO Perspective, Strategizing and Return to the Office. And I love this article because a number of CIOs are talking about, okay, we're going to get ready to go back to the office. What do I need to revisit, not only in my technology stack, but they were also talking about some of the other issues. But I thought the technology stack questions are really interesting here. Does my organization actually need its own network? Should I put IT security out on the edge so people can connect through native internet? Should devices secure themselves so they can connect across a hostile territory? I mean, these are like critical questions that we're all asking now, but the question is, what does that mean in your tech stack when you get back to the office?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I look at this as planning for the inevitable future. Because what you're going to have coming out of this is boards of directors and CEOs saying, do we really need all of this real estate? Do we really need all of this travel cost? Right? Can I get better client satisfaction and employee satisfaction out of having a remote workforce? And hey, by the way, can I recruit and retain talent better than I could have having, brick and mortar buildings? I mean, this is going to be the bigger business conversation that I see a lot of CEOs and boards having. So, this conversation, I think, is prepping for that.
Yeah, because if you think about it, think about certain areas of the country that are really expensive to hire people, house people, California, New York, et cetera. Now I'm in this remote. I'm like, wait a minute. Now I can recruit somebody out of Texas, might be cheaper, or who knows where, right? I can go get talent maybe out of different pools because now I have a technology stack and an environment that makes it easier for me to bring these remote folks in without relying on local resources and or physical buildings.
100%. And I mean, we've been talking about the perimeter spawning for years now. This is the ultimate portion of that, right? This is the actual ultimate spawning of the perimeter. The perimeter has blown up. It doesn't exist at all once we get to this place, right? Because now, and some businesses are already there. There are already businesses that don't have any brick and mortar and they're 100% remote. It's just now getting the enterprises up to that level.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been talking about a porous, vanishing perimeter for a long time, and poof, it's gone. Just like that.
Exactly.
This next article, Paul, you'll appreciate because how to answer an unanswerable question. This came up in our all hands last week, and I had to pull this article in because I'm like, the question for everybody was, when can we go back into the studio and start working again? And how do you answer that question? Because there is no answer. I don't know what the answer is. I know what the criteria is before we can make that decision. But, in this type of crisis, there's a lot of questions being asked that you just can't answer.
Yeah.
And I thought this was an interesting way to think about this.
100%. I mean, us as an organization, we were dealing with the same thing, right? And our leadership team is great. We were communicating for weeks and weeks before things started happening at state levels, right? Our headquarters is in Rhode Island. before there was a mandated stay at home, we were already having this conversation for probably close to a month. And our leadership, is great because we want to be candid with the employees at the end of the day. We want to show a level of vulnerability, a level of honesty, be completely candid. And some of the conversations were, listen, we wish we could give you an answer, but we don't have a crystal ball right now. The executive leadership team is on this on a day-to-day basis. We're communicating with each other on a regular cadence. And our job is to make the best decision for this organization as we get more and more information. Sometimes you just have to be that candid.
Yeah. And it was similar conversation for us, right? I mean, Colorado's starting to come out of lockdown, but Rhode Island, you guys still got another week or two, right? So until we see how this plays out, I don't know when I can get back into studio. I don't know when the rest of the employees can go back into studio. It is a set of criteria, but it's not a solid answer. I don't know, right?
And when you're a national and an international company, there are going to be different decisions being made over time, right? Because we can't treat Rhode Island like New York. We can't treat New York like our California office. We can't treat our California office like our Texas office. So we really have to be in tune what's happening in all these states, And if you're an international company, what's happening in the different countries around the world.
Yep. I'm ready to jump back on a plane and get back to Rhode Island as soon as you guys are ready to open up. I need some cigars and I need some time in the studio.
I'm ready to be in the studio, guys. Man, it's been too long.
I know everyone feels the same way. And right now we just don't have enough information to make a decision as to, or provide information as to when. So.
And hey, by the way, I mean, honestly, even if the states do declare that things can loosen a bit, every business is going to be a little bit different, and their culture is going to dictate whether or not they're comfortable with kind of releasing this, the stay-at-home policy and the working remote policy. Because again, the state can say we're open for business, but every organization has to evaluate their culture and what they're willing to tolerate too, from a risk perspective.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors, certainly.
Yeah, definitely. In this last article I brought in, because look, we're seeing a lot of people feeling that they're not motivated, they're not as effective, their productivity levels are down. I threw in this last article. A couple of the steps here I think are interesting, right? Is jumpstart your motivation with these 4 easy steps. The first one is just get the ball rolling, right? Just start. Because if you don't start, nothing's ever going to get done, right? There has to be a level of engagement in getting things started.
I love this article, Matt. I'm glad you put it in here because, I mean, we've talked about it on previous shows. There's so much concern in the security world about stress, about mental health, about, overburdened teams. And now you throw something like this where employees can start getting this level of cabin fever. Right. So for me, the whole mental illness and depression side of the aisle is very important for me as far as cybersecurity professionals. Get the ball rolling is a huge one. And they actually talked about a speech that Admiral McRaven did for a college commencement. And it's awesome. If you guys, if any of the listeners haven't seen it, look it up. It's absolutely incredible. He went into a lot of the things like we do in the military, and you know what? Get up in the morning, and the first thing you do, make your bed. Right? That's kind of the theme of the story. And what it does is it gives you this ability to get up in the morning, get the first task of the day done. You do it with pride. It shows you that little things matter. And hey, by the way, if you had the crappiest day in the world, when you get home, you can still get into a made bed. And tomorrow will be a better day, right? So it's like it's all these little things that you can do to kind of get that ball rolling and make things happen.
What I like to recommend to folks that works for me and others, and we've read articles and covered articles, is you break your work up into, let's say, 3 different buckets, right? You've got your daily tasks that have to get done pretty much every day on a regular basis, right? Then you've got your projects that you're working on. You pick one, and you have some focus and do some work on those projects, but then also have some of the other kind of fun things, fun projects and or tasks, right, that maybe aren't in the critical path right now, but you've got a research project or whatever. And balance between the three, right? When you're feeling like, oh God, like not motivated to do one of those things, you have something to switch to, right? To rejuvenate your motivation, and also take breaks too. Staring at code all day, for example, you get stale, right?
Sure.
Maybe put it down, go for a run, spend some time with family, come back, and oftentimes you can cut your troubleshooting in half or more just by setting it aside for a while.
Yeah, and the article talks about energy drains and energy multipliers, Paul, to your point, right? Certain activities are drains and other activities are multipliers, and you have to learn how to balance across them, whether it's work or home. The other big thing that has to be taken into account is figuring out that work-home balance in a remote environment, right? You can't be all work or all home. There's a balance there. So the exercise I have you go through is look at your energy drains and multipliers both for home and work so that you can balance those out during the day so that, if you fall into a drain, you can find something that'll actually help bring your energies back up.
Yeah, and it makes you sit back and take a look at how many of those energy drains can you actually eliminate out of your daily habits, work, life in general, right? And it forces you to evaluate all these things that are constantly pulling on you that don't add value, and how can you eliminate it or minimize it?
Automate it with scripting and code. That's what I like to do.
Yes. And on that note, we should get you back to scripting more. So thank you both for joining me today. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.